The call came in at 8:15 on a crisp Monday morning, October 15th, 2023. The air in Seattle's exclusive Queen Anne neighborhood was sharp with the scent of salt water and autumn decay. The voice on the line was elderly, laced with a quavering, genuine concern. It belonged to Arthur Chen, a 68-year-old retired architect who lived next door to the sprawling modern villa at 25 Highland Drive. He reported that the house, owned by the formidable businesswoman Julia Pham, had been unnervingly silent since the previous afternoon. The sleek, expensive garden lights were still on, casting an eerie, sterile glow on the perfectly manicured lawn, but no one had entered or exited. Arthur had rung the doorbell repeatedly. He had knocked until his knuckles were sore. He could hear the landline ringing inside, a frantic, unanswered summons in the tomb-like silence. A patrol unit from the Seattle Police Department's West Precinct arrived at 8:36. The officers noted the scene with practiced calm. The heavy, custom-made main door was bolted from the inside. All the floor-to-ceiling curtains were drawn, presenting a blind, impassive face to the world. The house was eerily, unnaturally silent. There were no signs of forced entry, no unusual smells. This wasn't a robbery. This was something else. Recognizing the signs of a potential welfare emergency, the senior officer on scene made the call. They were going in. By 8:47, the lock had been breached. The officers stepped inside, their hands resting on their sidearms. The air was cool and still, and on the high-end imported Italian tile floor of the cavernous living room, in front of a sleek white leather sofa that probably cost more than their cars, they discovered the body of a middle-aged woman. She was lying on her side, a pool of dried, coagulated blood matting the hair around her left temple. Her face was contorted, her features frozen in a mask of extreme, silent pain. The forensic team arrived shortly after. Their preliminary conclusion was that the victim had been dead for approximately 10 to 12 hours. An on-site examination found no other injuries, no ligature marks, no signs of a struggle on the body, but a severe hematoma under the skull indicated a single, devastatingly strong blow with a hard, unyielding object. The victim was quickly, easily identified. She was Julia Pham, born in 1968, the 55-year-old owner of the villa and the formidable CEO of a high-end interior design firm and Pew Interiors. Neighbors stated that Miss Pham was a widow living alone. Her only son was away, studying in Australia. She had, however, recently hired a new young maid, a quiet girl named Maria, who had been working for about 2 months, a girl who was now conspicuously missing. The maid's room, a small, Spartan space in the back of the house, was unusually, unnervingly empty. There were no clothes in the closet, no personal belongings on the nightstand. It was as if its owner had never existed, a ghost who had simply dissolved into thin air. The investigation began to piece together a chilling picture. There were no signs of forced entry from the outside. All the upstairs windows were locked securely from the inside. The expensive, state-of-the-art external CCTV system had been disabled, its power cord expertly pulled from the central connector in the basement. The cameras were estimated to have stopped recording at around midnight. A large, heavy safe in Julia Pham's master bedroom was open, but it hadn't been forced. It had been opened with the correct password. Other small, strange clues emerged. 2 glass cups sat on the living room coffee table. One held a small amount of water, the other was empty. No clear fingerprints were found, but both cups were carefully collected for examination. A very faint, almost invisible scratch was found on the hardwood floor, hidden under the edge of a Persian rug. It suggested that something or someone had been moved after the victim's death. The entire house, despite the violent death that had occurred within it, was suspiciously, meticulously clean. The Seattle PD formed a special task force. Their initial assessment was grim and pointed in one clear direction. The victim was almost certainly killed by someone she knew. The crime was estimated to have occurred sometime between 9 in the evening and 1 in the morning. It was quick, neat, and terrifyingly silent. None of the neighbors who lived in close proximity in this densely packed, upscale neighborhood had heard a scream or any sounds of a struggle. This pointed to a meticulously planned, cold-blooded murder, and the perpetrator had left almost nothing behind. No footprints, no scattered blood spatter, no fingerprints on any of the smooth, polished surfaces. Most notably, the young maid, the only other person known to be in the house, had vanished without a trace, and no one, not even the agency that had supposedly placed her, seemed to know her full name, her exact hometown, or her social security number. She was a ghost. The investigation deepened, digging into the life of the victim. Julia Pham was a powerful, successful woman. Her husband had died of a heart attack in 2016, and her only son was indeed studying abroad. Her interior design business was stable, and a preliminary financial check showed no bad debts, no criminal records, no ongoing legal disputes that would suggest a motive for murder. But then they found the second safe, a smaller, in-wall safe, concealed behind a painting in the master bedroom. It too was open and empty, and again there were no signs of it being forced. It had also been opened with a password. In a leather-bound notebook on Julia's desk, investigators found detailed handwritten records of expenses. These were not in the company's official accounting books. Some were for hundreds of thousands of dollars, marked with cryptic symbols like Q grain and TT. The recipients of these large sums were unknown. The search for the missing maid, Maria, finally yielded a clue. Tucked away in a desk drawer, they found a sealed envelope. Inside was a photocopy of a birth certificate for a girl named Maria Flores, born in 2007, from a small town in rural California. This birth certificate had no verification from any labor agency, no employment contract, no other official documents proving Maria's working relationship with Julia Pham. According to a former maid who was tracked down and interviewed, this was Julia's pattern. She preferred to hire undocumented girls under the age of 18. They were easier to control, she had said, and Julia never allowed their families to visit. It was a picture of tight, even autocratic control over her domestic staff. Maria had worked for about 6 weeks. She was very quiet, the former maid recalled, and rarely answered when asked questions, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. Digital clues began to surface. Julia Pham's phone showed short, stilted conversations in a secure, encrypted messaging app with an unsaved, unknown number. One exchange on the 10th of October was followed by an 8-second audio file, but its content was encrypted, a digital ghost in the machine. The medical examiner determined that the head injury was caused by a heavy, round, hard object, possibly a metal pipe or a solid wooden stick swung with immense, focused downward force. A faint 18-centimeter-long drag mark was found on the polished floor where the victim's head had rested, suggesting the body had been slightly, carefully moved post-mortem. There were no other blood spatters in the room. The scene was clean, too clean. A single, out-of-place object was found on the second-floor stair landing, a 45-centimeter length of blue synthetic rope. One end showed signs of being pulled forcefully, the fibers frayed and stretched. This rope did not belong to any of the household items. It had not been purchased by Julia Pham, according to her credit card records. Its characteristics were consistent with the cheap ropes used for tying down goods on trucks or in warehouses, suggesting the perpetrator had brought a tool with them or had taken it from an uncontrolled, unsecured area within the house. An exhaustive check of phone location data and the neighbor's security camera footage showed no signs of any stranger entering or lingering near the villa for a full 36 hours before Julia Pham's death. The killer was already inside. The investigation initially focused on 3 main suspects who had recent documented conflicts or close ties with Julia Pham within the past 6 months. The first was Frank Miller, a 40-year-old man who had been Julia's former private driver. He had been fired last May for suspected embezzlement of company funds. He had a known history of violence and domestic disputes and had reportedly tried to get his job back, only to be refused. Crucially, Miller had no solid alibi for the night of the murder. He initially claimed he was alone in his rented room in the city's Rainier Beach neighborhood. When pressed about why he was fired, he became evasive. He first said it was a verbal conflict, but then changed his story to resigning due to incompatibility. But company records showed Julia had fired him over thousands of dollars in unmatched bank deposits. He couldn't explain the source of $5,000 that had been deposited into his bank account on the morning of October 15th. First, he claimed it was borrowed from friends. then that it was old savings, despite his account only having a little over $100 in it the day before. He became agitated and defensive when questioned, but his GPS data, tracked from an old company phone he had failed to return, provided a surprisingly strong alibi. It confirmed Miller was in his rented room from 10 at night until 7 in the morning. This matched security camera footage from his apartment building, which showed him opening his room door at specific times. The alibi was solid. The second suspect was David Chen, a 45-year-old former business partner. Julia Pham had recently sued him for misappropriating over $400,000 from a joint venture. He had sent threatening text messages after the lawsuit was filed, and his recent financial behavior was abnormal. He had withdrawn all of his personal savings in cash just a week before the murder. Chen claimed he was out drinking with friends at a pub in the Belltown neighborhood, but there was no camera footage to confirm this. His phone location data was also suspicious, showing no movement from 8 in the evening until 4 in the morning, which was highly unusual for him. A short, suspicious Bluetooth connection was detected on his phone at 1:13 in the morning, with a signal that pinged a tower near the crime scene. For a moment, it seemed they had their man, but further, more detailed analysis showed the Bluetooth signal was not from near Highland Drive, but from nearly 2 miles away, at a restaurant in the Pike Place market area. This matched his alibi. A credit card receipt, time-stamped at 2:12 in the morning on October 15th, listed Chen's name along with 2 friends. Witnesses at the pub confirmed he had been there until almost 3 in the morning. His alibi, too, was solid. Forensic tests came back, further muddying the waters. DNA samples from under the victim's fingernails, from the strange blue rope, and from the bedroom doorknob did not match Miller or Chen. The only identifiable fingerprints on the water glass in the living room belonged to Julia Pham. The investigation had hit a wall. Both prime suspects, men with clear motives of money and revenge, had been eliminated. The case was back at square one, with the added chilling concern of an unknown 4th person and the still missing maid, the ghost named Maria. The crucial breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Julia Pham's villa was a smart home, fully automated and integrated. Although the CCTV had been disabled, the main door's smart lock system had an internal motion sensor that had recorded an entry and exit at 2:04 in the morning, a time that did not match the alibis of either of the initial suspects. The fingerprint data from the lock's scanner did not match Miller, Chen, or any of Julia Pham's known relatives. Someone else had been there. A neighbor, a young woman who was an early riser, recalled seeing Maria leaving on a scooter at around 4 in the morning. She seemed to be in a hurry, the neighbor said, and she wasn't carrying her usual backpack. The local street cameras had missed it, but a private security camera 400 meters down the road had captured a small girl matching Maria's description. She was wearing a brown jacket and a baseball cap, riding a scooter with a blurred license plate, heading towards Lake Union at 4:18 in the morning. Most significantly, the grainy footage showed a second person on the back of the scooter, a tall, thin figure in a black jacket, their face obscured by the darkness and the poor quality of the video. The most damning piece of evidence was yet to come. On October 20th, a deeper forensic dive into the smart home system's virtual assistant data revealed a 19-second audio recording. It had been triggered by a voice command at 2:12 in the morning on October 15th, almost the exact time the medical examiner had estimated the victim was killed. The recording was cut off at the beginning, but it clearly contained the voices of an older woman identified by voice print analysis as Julia Pham and a young woman, matching the initial descriptions of Maria. The conversation was tense, charged with anger and fear. "I told you," Julia's voice was sharp, imperious. "This thing must never be taken outside this house." "I just borrowed it for a little bit," the younger voice, Maria's, was pleading. "I didn't mean to take it." "If you keep arguing with me," Julia's voice rose, "tomorrow morning I will call the police." "Please." Maria's voice was now a desperate, panicked whisper. "I beg you, don't tell anyone or I'll die." Immediately after her last word, there was a sound, a loud, sickening thud, the sound of a heavy object falling on a hard surface or striking something solid. It was followed by an abrupt, absolute silence. Audio forensics confirmed there were no cries for help, no sounds of multiple people struggling. It strengthened the hypothesis that only two people, the victim and the maid, were in the house at the moment of the murder. An internal call log from Julia's landline showed an incomplete 4-second call had been attempted at 1:59 in the morning to her company's main office number. A desperate, failed attempt to summon help. At 10:40 in the morning on the day the body was found, Maria's phone was briefly reactivated. It pinged a cell tower near the city's main bus station, but no calls were made or received. No internet was used. It was turned off again after 12 minutes and remained inactive. This was not the act of a panicked, impulsive teenager. The fragmented audio, the attempted call, and the professional shutdown of the phone confirmed that the motive was a personal conflict related to property, and that the crime was not an impulsive act of violence, but a meticulously planned cover-up. On October 21st, CCTV footage from the bus station confirmed Maria's presence there at 10:53 on the morning of the 15th. She was wearing a brown jacket, a baseball cap, a face mask, and was now carrying a backpack. And she was not alone. A thin, tall man, estimated to be in his 30s, wearing a black jacket and a dark baseball cap, was walking closely beside her. They took a bus heading east, towards the agricultural plains of eastern Washington, getting off at an intermediate stop in a small, dusty town. They were seen checking into an unmarked, cash-only motel, leaving after only 4 hours. A small red plastic bag was found abandoned in their room. Inside was a single black fabric glove, the kind used by movers or warehouse workers. It had dried, dark stains on the knuckles. The blood sample was rushed to the state crime lab for testing. The man's image did not match anyone in the state's criminal or DMV databases. He was another ghost. On the 22nd of October, acting on a tip, police found Maria. She was working at an unlicensed sweatshop-like leather goods factory in a rural part of Grant County, using the false name of Anna and a fake ID. She did not resist arrest. She did not cry. She did not ask why they were there. She simply looked up at the detectives with dead, empty eyes and said, "I knew this day would come." After 6 hours of interrogation, Maria Flores confessed to killing Julia Pham. She claimed it was unintentional, that it had happened in a moment when she lost control. On the night of the 14th, she said Julia had caught her secretly opening the safe to take a small jewelry box. "I just wanted to sell it to send money home," Maria stated, her voice a monotone, "because she never paid me on time." An argument erupted, with Julia threatening to call the police. In the struggle, Maria claimed she had forcefully pulled Julia's arm, causing her to lose her balance and fall backward. In a panic, Maria said she had grabbed a heavy, decorative wooden stick that was part of a display next to the television cabinet and had struck Julia once on the head. She said she didn't check if Julia was alive or dead. She just stood there, stunned, before she started to clean the scene. She admitted to independently disabling the security cameras, unplugging the devices, deleting data from Julia's phone, and locking the door from the inside. And then, she said, she called someone to pick her up. The person who picked her up was a 33-year-old man named Hector Vargas. He was Maria's boyfriend. He had no stable job and a history of administrative penalties for using minors for illegal labor. And he was the one who had directly introduced Maria to work for Julia Pham. Bank records and text messages showed that Hector had been instructing Maria from the very beginning. He had told her how to lie about her age, how to forge documents, how to create fake SIM card accounts. And he had given her detailed, step-by-step instructions on methods to cover up her tracks after committing a crime. Despite Maria's repeated robotic claims that she didn't know it was murder and that she was only afraid of losing her job, the investigation concluded that her sophisticated cover-up and escape actions proved she had full awareness of the severity of the crime. She had been psychologically and operationally manipulated by an adult with clear, predatory intentions. On October 23rd, Lathi Mai, whose real name was Maria Flores, was charged with murder. Hector Vargas was charged with concealing a crime and enticing a minor to commit a crime. The trial for Maria Flores began on November 28th at the King County Superior Court. It was held behind closed doors, as she was still under the age of 18. She appeared in court pale and thin, wearing a loose-fitting juvenile detention shirt. Her hands were clasped in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. She showed no tears, no emotion. She did not deny the murder, but her answers to the prosecutor's questions were short, decisive, and chillingly emotionless. When asked why she didn't flee immediately, but stayed for hours to meticulously clean the crime scene, she replied, her voice barely a whisper, "Because he told me to do it." When asked if she understood the legal consequences of her actions, she merely shook her head. The court determined that despite being under 18, Maria fully understood the nature of her actions. Her methodical cleaning of the scene and her carefully planned escape demonstrated premeditation and a clear attempt to evade law enforcement. This was not a purely impulsive act of a panicked teenager. The prosecution also highlighted Hector Vargas's insidious role in guiding and instigating Maria, including providing her with fake documents and the knowledge needed to evade the law. Maria Flores was sentenced to 18 years in prison for murder, with the court considering the mitigating factors of her being a minor, having no prior criminal record and having been clearly influenced and manipulated by others. Hector Vargas, the puppet master, was sentenced to life in prison for concealing a crime, organizing illegal labor, and especially for his role as the mastermind who had incited a minor to commit a serious, violent crime. The case was closed, but it left behind a harsh, lingering warning. A 17-year-old girl, uneducated about the law and inadequately protected by the system, had been led down a path of crime, manipulated like a puppet on a string. Her arrest revealed only a hollowed-out fear, not regret, not remorse, not even a basic understanding of the life she had taken. The case served as a profound, terrifying alert. When a child lacks proper education, timely legal protection, or guidance on the basic boundaries of human behavior, their immaturity and innocence can become a dangerous, deadly weapon. And if that fragile innocence falls into the hands of a bad person, the first victim is often not others, but the child's own future. The case of the silent villa on Highland Drive was a stark reminder that educating and protecting children is not solely the responsibility of families or the law, but a collective, urgent societal obligation.